Welcome, everybody, to Microsoft Unboxed Pod, episode 21. We have done 21 of these bad boys, and we want to thank you all for being here. Those of you who have been here from the first pod, or those of you who joined just today. Either way, welcome. I'm your host today, Kareem Anderson. I'm joined by.
David Allen. Well, since this is the 21st pod, does that mean we're of legal drinking age here on the pod?
Yeah, I should have, and it's Friday. I should have brought something to celebrate. Maybe next week I'll bring a drink. We can pick up where Mary Jo and Paul left off with their whole beer thing. I want to get everyone into what we're talking about quickly, because despite it being another slow week during the summer, we still have quite a bit to talk about. We'll be bouncing back and forth between a few topics. First one being kind of a downer, which is Microsoft laying off hundreds who worked in Azure, and we'll talk about specifically why they might have done that. And it's a story of, once again, AI coming for some people's jobs. They took our jobs. Intel joining the Copilot PC era with their new chip, albeit a bit late. Asus to launch the ROG Ally X in July, so they're coming fast with the refresh, and you can get into all the details on that. We have some reports. Now, again, this isn't founded. There's no official statements, but there are reports that Microsoft's considering taking its biggest franchise and letting PlayStation users play around with it. And this could be, what breaks the dam when it comes to Xbox and maybe its own fandom in the future. We'll be talking briefly about DaVinci Resolve on ARM and how that's a big win for this upcoming Windows on ARM revolution. We'll be touching briefly on Summer Game Fest 2024 and ending the pod with a conversation about recall once again, because we've gotten some new information. So I need to let you guys know about that, as well as what happens when one company says something, gets a lot of flack for it, and another company follows up and gets nothing done about it. This may be reminiscent for those of you who went through the whole Xbox One debacle, where Microsoft said a bunch of stuff that Sony had planned to say as well, and then come Sunday morning or Sunday, whenever they announced it, they took all that stuff, all that language out, and said, "Hey, we're just gonna give you a console." And Microsoft basically lost a whole generation because of that. We feel like they're another company that's about to do something similar. Before we get into that, let's get into that first story that I mentioned at the top. This is one that you want to talk about, David. What are we talking about?
Well, we've got Microsoft is laying off quite a few people here at Amazon. Listen at me, boy.
If only they could lay out the people at Amazon.
Yeah,
if only situation.
Sorry about that, guys. I just made an Amazon purchase before the pod here, so I guess that's on my mind. Microsoft is laying off hundreds who work at Azure, so yet another round of layoffs, unfortunately, in the tech industry, and another round of layoffs for Microsoft. And as far as keeping employees on payroll, things for Microsoft have not been very positive for them or their employees over the last year. I would say, this roughly was in motion about this time last year. They started announcing that people were going to be let go. So this time it is that the Azure for Operators and Mission Engineering teams are part of a group that were created in 2021 that were led by Jason Zander, who was the former Azure leader and works in quantum space and government-run computing. Now, I get it. It's another negative for Microsoft. Microsoft has announced multiple times that they're trimming the workforce. They're saying they ramped up the workforce for COVID, where they would have enough cloud capacity with everybody going to this work from home atmosphere, but the hits keep coming in terms of layoffs. And for me, that worries me, because we've seen a couple game studios close already after Microsoft is able to spend $70 billion on Activision Blizzard. We have beat that to death by this point. And I get, trim the fat in the workforce. You've got to trim the fat to move forward. But come on, Microsoft, you're making money. You're spending billions of dollars. I feel bad for not only just the Microsoft employees, all these companies that still announce that not 25 people laid off, not 25 people that are 1,500, that 25 people still without a job and a way to pay their bills and feed their family. But these mass layoffs are just, they put a damper on the, tech in general, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's a downer situation. I just want to give some people some kind of details a little bit more on this. They are saying they're going to be laying off anywhere between 1,000 to 1,500 workers across the Azure cloud and mixed reality departments. Again, we know HoloLens has basically been running with skeleton crew, so I don't know how much more they can pull from that. So it leads us to believe that most of these will be coming from Azure, so to speak. And in the company email, I believe Jason Zander, the executive vice president of strategic missions and technologies at Microsoft, said, "Our clear focus as a company is to define the AI wave and empower all customers to succeed in the adoption of the transformative technology. Along the way, we make decisions that align with our long-term vision and strategy while ensuring the stability and growth of Microsoft." So, for those of you who don't speak corporate speak, we are investing in AI. And it seems to be at the detriment of Azure, which again is their bread and butter. I mean, as much as they're pitching AI, the revenue for it just isn't there yet, and the profits surely aren't there yet. So for this to come, 1,500, losing 1,500 people, regardless of my own personal opinions about layoffs and everyone kind of the personal toll it takes on people, this is a potentially bad loss of employees to power the cloud. Again, the cloud is still going to be there. It's still very big, and you're going to need it to power your AI. And you just let go potentially anywhere from 1,000 to more employees who know about the cloud. These people are going to walk down the street potentially and go to Amazon or go to Apple or go to Google or go to, God forbid, Twitter, X, whatever. I mean, they're going to go to other companies. People will find jobs in other places. And not like you just cut them and they disappear off the earth. Like, they will find other jobs, and this could make your position for Azure or your position for the cloud dominance that much harder, especially in the wake of AI not having proven itself yet. I get that Microsoft's all in on this, but I personally think there's no need to break what's working at the moment.
Yes.
So we'll see how this works out for them. Obviously, I'm not a fan of the decision. I'm not a fan of the call, but hey, it's not about my fandom. It's about, I guess what makes dollars of sense for the company.
Well, there's somebody, I don't want to sound bad here, but there's somebody sitting in an office somewhere at Microsoft or all these companies that are saying this makes sense, or we can combine this job, and and I guess we have seen tech go through this many times through the years. The ebbs and flows of technology bring jobs, but as you mentioned, you and I see AI on a different level. We are tech enthusiasts. We cover tech. Therefore, we use it. Businesses are using it, and we have talked about businesses pivoting to AI, and businesses would be the first to do it. I have still yet to see a whole lot of evidence of businesses saying, hey, AI is awesome. This is what we use it for. Look at what we can do. I see talk. I see little bits and pieces. I haven't seen the boosters on the AI rocket fire up yet. Let me put it that way, since we had a space shuttle launch this week.
Topical. I like it. Yeah, I'm not going to belabor the point anymore. Microsoft, for all intents and purposes, sacrificed Azure for AI at the moment. We'll see if that's a winning strategy. Good luck for them, and Godspeed to all the employees that will need to go to LinkedIn, ironically, another Microsoft property, and start looking for new opportunities. But good luck to them. We'll be moving on to our next topic, which is Intel joins the Copilot PC wave with their new Lunar Lake chip. I wrote about this earlier this week. We had the weird kind of kerfuffle during Microsoft's presentation with its introduction of the Snapdragon X Elite platform, powering these new Copilot PCs. Microsoft's long-term steady partner in Intel was absent, and we thought, hey, that was kind of weird. And they'd made reference that Intel would come up with something later in the year. We find out that it's Lunar Lake essentially, and when they mean later in the year, they do mean later in the year. They're talking, I believe, Intel is pitching for Q3 2024 for these, so they're not going to start shipping these chipsets into devices until about the holiday season. So if you're looking for a Intel-based version of this chip or Intel-based version of this this platform experience, you're gonna have to wait a while. Some of the details on this are pretty good though, and if you don't mind waiting, you may actually end up getting more for your money, so to speak, because the chipset is offering uh, a similar efficiency and power core architecture, but they have a new power core codenamed Lion Code, which is it dramatically allocates tasks between efficiency cores and power proficiency cores. With I believe Intel leaning heavily on its thread directory technology in order to kind of do this real time swap. So there won't be any kind of ramp up or slow down, so to speak, when it comes to launching and operating programs on the fly, or closing certain things, or leaving certain things running in the background. Intel, we're trusting Intel to be able to swap that kind of on the fly, but they'll be using the help of Microsoft's re-architecture of Windows 11 operating system scheduler. They've kind of re-architect this to kind of help with that sort of thing, and I think it's basically to kind of lead stuff into the NPU and to divide up what's an NPU task versus what's a CPU task versus what's an integrated GPU task. So Intel's going to lean on that, and they both have two systems to kind of operate and run that. So presumably, we should be getting a lot more proficiency out of these chips whenever they do land. I don't know about heat or fan noise, stuff like that, because this is Intel, but we'll see. I think the chips will launch with, I believe, 45 tops. So again, they will meet the requirement that Microsoft set forth for running this Copilot Plus platform. They will also have an integrated Intel Xe2, so the second version of this GPU that they have, alongside an Xe Matrix extension at the XM-Xe. To tackle even more AI tasks. And I believe the Xe Matrix will have a dedicated 65 tops for its AI content chores. So, we're getting 45 in the Qualcomm Snapdragon, but this thing will have its own 45 NPU plus a GPU, an integrated GPU that can, basically swap for more AI tasks with 67 tops. So that's even more. So that's what I'm saying. Like, if you don't mind waiting for these chips, you may be getting more for your money. The other things that they talked about at the launch was the Intel Xeon 6 processor with efficiency cores, delivering performance and power efficiency for high density tasks at about 4 times the performance watt of the previous versions. They're also announcing pricing for Intel's Gaudi, Gaudi 2, and Intel Gaudi 3 AI accelerator kits, which should deliver high performance up to about a third lower the cost compared to competitive platforms. It seems like, again, Intel will meet the moment, just albeit a bit later. We also got, and this is again came out of information from Computex. We also got information from AMD and I believe NVIDIA, which will also be launching their own pretty powerful NPU supported chips as well. So while Qualcomm might get a lot of the praise for the first few months, these other companies are right on, nipping at their tails to make sure that all of us PC owners will get competition in the market. What are your thoughts on this?
2 things. Number one, I'm glad to see it. Competition is back in the CPU market. Competition is back for power. Competition is back for efficiency. And it kind of reminds me of the early to mid 2000s where we had the AMD wars and the Intel wars were back and forth there for a while. Um, I'm glad to see that. I'm glad to see more players entering the fight with Snapdragon with Qualcomm. You mentioned Nvidia was entering theirs, but I want to bring two questions to the table, and I really don't want to belabor the point because we don't know yet. But I think these are things we need to think about. One, we saw that AMD mentioned. I saw a specific line during their presentation at Computex where they are running the ARM programs. That's what I'm going to call it here for our viewers. Where they are running your ARM program natively, because I think in some ways we may have forgotten that if you've got your brand new Surface over here that's ARM based, and you've got an x86 piece of software that you need to run, Microsoft says that Prism, the translation layer, takes care of that. AMD is saying, well, we're going to do it. We can do it on chip without the Prism layer. So I'm interested to see, number one, what's the performance of that going to be versus a system that has to use the Prism layer to do that. And you had mentioned in your post this week the XE2 GPU and the Intel offerings. GPUs keep coming to mind because there was something else that you had put on the site this week that the gamers could skip the hardcore gamers could skip the Qualcomm offerings because of the lack of a dedicated 3D GPU. Well,
Yeah.
go ahead. I'll finish.
No, no, go ahead, finish. I'll let you finish.
So we've talked about efficiency. Where does the dedicated GPU fit into this equation? Because eventually, I feel like it has to happen. There has to be some sort of dedicated GPU, and there's always the balance of how much power and battery is used. It's always been that way in the creative laptops and even the low end creatives, because those GPUs suck just a little more juice than the integrated variety. So is NVIDIA working in the background on a gaming GPU for your brand new laptops, or is Snapdragon working on improving theirs with 3D modeling and the tools needed to play Call of Duty, for example? I feel like it's great. We've got these powerful things, and we're going to talk about how DaVinci Resolve can run on these in just a minute. But the gamers and creatives, are they being left out here?
Yeah, that's a good point. I had mentioned in my write-up about gamers kind of bypassing Qualcomm and waiting for these AMD and NVIDIA chips. Is that NVIDIA already currently offers GPUs that have way more top performance than what Microsoft's asking for the Copilot stuff. It's just that no apps have been written to really access that stuff. And going forward, there will be NVIDIA GPUs that will offer up to 1,000 tops per se. So there will be performance jumps. I think what Microsoft's trying to do is offer the portable section first. So if you are looking for something that is thin, sleek, quiet, perhaps fanless, Snapdragon and maybe even Intel to a certain extent will be those devices. If you're looking to run a more efficient, quieter, somewhat cooler, production PC, like a tower or something like that, you will now have devices that can tap into the AI portions of their software. So there's tons of AI in DaVinci Resolve. There's tons of AI in Premiere Pro. Like these things will be written to task these specific sections of the GPU, so that you won't necessarily get that fan burning hot while it's trying to, manage where the CPU and how much of the GPU is being used. These things will just be offloaded automatically, saying, "Hey, I'm a writer of the software. I want my software to touch those tops, whatever, specifically for these tasks," and they will run alongside all the other stuff like rendering, massive Ford 8K editing, tons of layers and things like that. All that can be processed on the CPU, while the AI portions of it, the stuff that they use to do translation or lighting and coloring and filtering and all that other stuff, can run right alongside of it and not have a stutter at all, because it's tapping the GPU, the specific sections of the GPU, and perhaps even rendering all the while, and your PC doesn't get clogged. I think that's how we're going to start seeing these kind of things go forward, if I had to guess.
And I'll bring up one more thing, and then we'll drop this. I know we need to move on. Minis Forms. Has anybody ever heard of Minis Forms? The folks that make the miniature PCs, they make a few gaming PCs with dedicated GPUs. They've got one coming out here in the next few weeks with a higher end 7000 AMD GPU. And when I say mini, they're about the size of an Apple TV unit, if those have seen them, maybe a little smaller. And we did see that Snapdragon is truly interested in being everywhere. We saw something last week about possible desktops. We saw what the dev kit would look like. Basically, reminded me of an oversized Apple TV, to stick with the same form factor. So I don't think it'll be that long before we see somebody running a 1080p Call of Duty title on something Snapdragon or AI based. I think it's just going to take a little more time.
I agree. Speaking of gaming, we're going to move on to our next topic, which is Asus launching the ROG Ally X in July. What are your details on this?
Yep, that's kind of why I was making the comment I did, because what is also really cool to me, Asus they had teased us in late May that something new was coming along the Ally lineup, and the Ally X is what they announced. It was announced on June the 2nd, and the hardware was basically a quick upgrade to 24 gigs of DDR5 RAM. They have, and I had mentioned this last week a little bit, they have modified the grips on the controller to be a little more ergonomic. The controllers, the thumbstick, that's the word I'm looking for. The thumbsticks have been upgraded to take a little more abuse. What was also neat, they have done away with the XG. For those that knew, Asus made an XG Mobile, which was a mobile, extremely high-priced GPU with a proprietary PCI connector that you could plug into the top of the original ROG Ally. Thankfully, that has been done away with, and we have two USB 4 ports at the top. Those are a full 40 gigabits per second USB 4 ports. So in theory, you should be able to attach an eGPU to your unit if you wanted to. Now, what's neat about these is it kind of goes along with what I was mentioning there about the Snapdragon CPU, GPU situation. These are the same AMD Ryzen Extreme chips are powering the Ally X. There is no chip change. There is no screen change. It's basically, as far as horsepower goes, just a RAM change. They have moved you up to 24 gigs of LPDDR5. So you'll see maybe a slight increase in your frames per second in your performance. You also get a 1 terabyte full size SSD, so that is now user replaceable. They made a point to tell you that. They have also doubled your battery life. That was one of the big complaints with the original model. You were only, I think the original model was 40 watt hours. This one is around 80 watt hours. So in theory, your battery life should be a lot better. Don't have an official launch date, but it's coming sometime in July. What was interesting is the pricing is up to $799. So what I took from that by reading up to, the original version had the AMD Extreme CPU, GPU, and there is a version that is the non-extreme. Now, I have used a non-extreme. I'm going to be honest, I don't recommend it. So I'm assuming there may be a non-extreme of the Ally X that would be just a bit cheaper, but if my money's on the line, I'm getting the full $799 unit. I think portable gaming has come a long way in the last year and a half, and I'm waiting to see what Lenovo comes out with. There was talk of a new MSI Claw this week at Computex, so it's a good time to be a portable gamer. Yes, please. Thank you.
I'm right there with you, my friend. We're going to talk about our next topic, which is, again, still the realm of gaming, but not as nice or as bright as the previous story. Reports are Microsoft is considering bringing Halo onto the PS5 with its exactly with the first game being Halo Combat Evolved Remastered. So I believe Tom Warren is one of the sources we're using for this. He's saying that sources tell him Microsoft's working on some form of Halo Combat Evolved Remastered that is also being considered for rival consoles. He doesn't expect them to announce it during the showcase this weekend, I believe, but because it's early days for the game to be remastered in general, but it could be coming up soon. Reports are that Microsoft's willing to take some more calculated risk in launching new titles, and they're using what they call, I think it's Project Latitude. That's the term for these games that will be moved over from Microsoft's exclusivity, so to speak, onto other platforms. Some of those games that are we've kind of hinted at or talked about so far have already been Starfield and an upcoming Indiana Jones game, I believe, from Bethesda, was it? Which are already being considered for PS5. But that's not it. We're also, I guess, again, consideration. So these are just people sitting in a boardroom perhaps right now talking before they get the developers working on it. But Age of Empires 2 Definitive Edition could be showing up on rival consoles, i.e. Nintendo Switch or PS5. The remastered spinoff, Age of Mythology, Retold, Senua's Saga, Hellblade 2, which was just recently released on Xbox and the PC, is also for consideration. Again, Project Latitude is just so far people talking about it before they decide to launch it. But with that being said, Microsoft did see a positive bump when they released Hi-Fi Rush and Sea of Thieves and made it available for PlayStation users. So again, when they say calculated risk, I think they're seeing the numbers saying like, hey, this is worth us doing it. And I believe we've had this conversation. I'll let you speak on it in 1 second about Microsoft becoming a full-on publisher. I know that we fans, longtime Xbox guys, we've understood them as a console maker who has games. They don't necessarily have a lot of their own good first-party games, but they make a console and we're allowed to play, games on it. Going forward, they may just be the company that has the games and maybe not necessarily the exclusivity. What are your thoughts?
Two things real quick. One, I think they almost have to do this. After their deals and debacles with the Activision Blizzard merger and the FTC and making promises here and promises there, I think now we've got to the point where it's time to make good on those promises. It's time to show that good faith that they're going to work with Sony, and they're going to put those fears to rest. They've already told us last week that Black Ops 6 hits Game Pass day one. So, that they kind of need to do something for the other console makers to extend that good faith And to comment a little bit on what you said about Microsoft being a software publishing company first, I think that's dead on. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think gamers necessarily care what they play on as long as their titles run and they have access to what they want to play at an economical price. I'm going to be straight up with you. If we didn't cover Microsoft products, I'm not saying I would go out and buy a PlayStation 5. No, that's not what I'm going to say. What keeps me in the Microsoft camp is the integration that they have with Windows, Game Pass, and the ability to choose where and how I want to play. And I know I sound like a miniature version of Phil Spencer here because that's what he's preached. But I don't think excuse me, I don't think gamers
don't get choked up. It's okay. It's just gaming.
I don't think gamers here in the end really care what they play on. I'm sure there's folks out there that going, Microsoft could build a monster Xbox console. I'm a Sony person. I wouldn't go buy it. Sure, I get it. There's those folks out there, and it goes the other way as well. But hardware, as long as it works and plays as intended, I don't think people care. Nintendo could make I'm going to make a little crack here. Nintendo could make a Nintendo station, and as long as it played the games and users had access and it was fairly priced, people will go buy a Nintendo station.
Yeah, I'm just going to put a button on this and we'll move on to the next thing is that we're going to have to start seeing Microsoft and Sony more as partners going forward,
Yes.
and Nintendo as a partner than we are as rivals. I mean, to be honest with you and to be frank with everybody else out there, Microsoft competed in the console generation wars with the Xbox 360, and mostly because they had to resell a bunch of devices, but they lost the Xbox One generation. They are currently losing the Xbox Series X generation. I think their pivot that, again, I'm a fan. I bought every Xbox console. I've even owned PlayStation consoles. Is that they're going to start, to your point, making the games for the platforms, for Windows, for the Switch, for PlayStation. And so we're going to have to see them going from rivals to, hey, this is just Windows on an Asus computer. This is just Windows on an HP laptop. This is just Windows on Lenovo's handheld gaming system. This is just Windows on their own Surface Pro devices. That's the way we're gonna have to start seeing it. They'll still make their own console, but it's not. They may not pitch it as the only place to get that game to sell more consoles. They're going to say, hey, our partners over at Sony have made an amazing PlayStation 6, and if you got Game Pass, here's Call of Duty for much cheaper. You don't or when you're not playing it, you don't have to pay the $70 or $80 for it or whatever. You can just get it off your library, come back to it at your own leisure, kind of thing. Like, that's what I'm seeing the future as. But now, if you want to add one more thing, go ahead.
Yeah, one more thing. Where before anybody jumps on us about it, Microsoft and Sony and Xbox and the right, where does Microsoft win, folks? No matter what happens, where do they win? Now think about where do they win? No matter what happens, Azure cloud. They can say, hey, we have the software, we have the infrastructure. We can still charge you for that infrastructure while you build games and platforms for other things. Microsoft wins all the way around by becoming a software publisher. Maybe, as we've mentioned in the past, they come up with the schematics of an Xbox. They sell that to a Dell. They sell that to an Asus. They sell that to an MSI and go, you make the console. Maybe the console is not even called Xbox. They set the standard. They make the software. Everybody wins.
Fair enough. Moving on to our next topic, we'll be talking about DaVinci Resolve real quick. There's not a lot of information on it right now, but we did want to touch upon the fact that they are in beta, I believe, right now
Beta
with
3.
DaVinci, with DaVinci Resolve on ARM. This is huge because for all of the marketing Microsoft has tried to do with Windows and ARM, it's never been able to kind of cater towards creatives, and those are the people who unfortunately are the ones that run to YouTube and pump out tons of content saying, hey, Windows and ARM isn't ready yet because I can't edit my videos on it. I can't render these things. I can't, push the limits of my, graphical editing or anything like that. Uh, Having Adobe already run on ARM for Macs and testing the heavier portions of their portfolio, the more strenuous apps on the Snapdragon X chipset, and now DaVinci Resolve coming, which again, for those of you who are in video editing, know as the free alternative. I mean, you can pay the full price for it if you want to get all the features, but it is amazing out of the box for a free piece of software. Coming out and running on beta, hopefully they'll have fine-tuned everything by maybe the end of summer. This is, again, bodes well for Windows and ARM, in my opinion.
I think this is the item that is missing, and I think a lot of people, myself included, have and will give DaVinci Resolve a shot. That'll be one of the first things I download when we start getting our Snapdragon units in for review, or we have to buy it, whatever we have to do. That's going to be one of the first things I download, because do I edit video on the daily? No. But do I edit video on the weekly? Yes. So this has to happen. It just bugs me, even as somebody who has used a Mac. Adobe, this was their chance to lead the charge with Creative Cloud. Creative Cloud on ARM is here, and people would be clamoring for it, I think. But DaVinci Resolve is out first. Go DaVinci, Blackmagic makes DaVinci Resolve. Go Blackmagic. You've got your software out there. We know what people will be downloading, unless within the next 10 days or so, Adobe says, okay, here's Creative Cloud on ARM. Then things might get interesting. But for now, I'll be downloading DaVinci.
Yeah, I mean, again, in Adobe's defense, they do have Photoshop already on ARM, and they have a web-based version, I believe, you can also use. But Premiere, being again the heavier of its app selections, I believe After Effects as well, Audition, and some other ones are in the pipeline. They are working on it. Microsoft mentioned this during their presentation. Now, to your point, DaVinci Resolve is probably going to get out ahead of them because again, people who have ARM, Windows and ARM devices without the Snapdragon chipset can start testing this out and seeing how the performance currently is. So again, they'll beat Adobe, but Adobe has inertia. So that's what's on their side. We'll get into our next one, which is Summer Game Fest. I don't know if you want to briefly talk about this or what you're hoping for, expecting from.
Yep, I just wanted to quickly bring that up. I know we had covered it back in March when it was originally mentioned. Just to throw it out there, Summer Game Fest is today. And
okay, you're right.
Yes, it is today. Today is the 7th. It's at 2 p.m. Pacific, so it will be rolling out here in the next couple hours. Now, what we're hoping to see from it, where there could be some mention of Gears of War 6, I keep hearing is coming out, that there may be some talk about it. We know that there's going to be a special of Call of Duty Black Ops 6 that will be shortly after the main presentation. So it's going to be interesting to see what Microsoft does. It's supposed to be 30 minutes of just game. No sales tactics, no coming soon, no, we've sold this many, somebody else sold this many. It's supposed to be 30 minutes of just game. Check it out on the Xbox YouTube channel. Again, that is 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern. Today, June the 7th.
Go check it out. You'll probably have watched that before you get to this podcast. But so leave us your thoughts in the comments, what you were happy to see, what you would like to see more of, we love to talk gaming. Our next and last one is about uh, recall. It's been the hot topic for the past week or two, and it looks like Google is quietly trying to perhaps produce something very similar because they see the utility in it. Now, I had mentioned at the top of this pod that there are some things that have come to light or changed since we last talked about it last weekend. I was very bullish on the thing. I still am, just because of the way I believe it's going to be applied. But cybersecurity expert Kevin Beaumont, I believe, who also used to work at Microsoft for a brief period of time, went to Twitter, I believe, on Monday and posted a tweet saying Microsoft told media outlet hackers could not exfiltrate Copilot plus recall activity remotely. The reality, he says, is how do you think hackers will exfiltrate this plain text database of everything the user has ever viewed on their PC? Very easily. I have, quote, automated it. So he's created a website, Beaumont, where he posts everything that he was able to pull from his own Copilot, recall, Copilot plus recall platform. And it's not without merit to say this could be a big issue. I know Microsoft had told us it could be encrypted. I don't know how that plays with how Beaumont pulled it. At the moment, he has not laid out how he's done it, but he does plan to if Microsoft doesn't address this before they roll out the feature. We are presuming that the feature will be rolled out probably next week when the devices hit people's reviewers' hands and people have gotten their pre-orders or whatnot. So essentially, Microsoft's on the clock for the next, I don't know, 5 to 6 days. They have to figure out a way to adjust this. And the other thing they need to adjust is that currently people who are testing it say it's a opt-out experience. And this may just because it's for insiders and people who have gotten access to it early. And Microsoft says they have plans to make it an opt-in, but right now it's not that. So they're going to need to address that as well. Make that quick switch, flip the light switch on that, because again, that's also an issue. What are your thoughts on this before we move on to Google sort of mimicking, or maybe running into the same potential pitfalls?
I would love to say this hacker is wrong. That's what I would, that's what I would love to say. But usually these hackers are not wrong. And if Microsoft is doing anything with recall in plain text where it's easily hackable, shame on Microsoft. Love you, but thought you knew a little better than this. This is not the right approach, and this will quickly cause a fire for Microsoft to have to deal with. And then the marketing and PR team will have to retool after they have fixed it. If this fire starts, then they will have to resell or reconvince people to use recall. Why didn't you just do it right the first time when it was mentioned? Before the words Windows recall was even mentioned, it should have been done right. And we're not having this discussion. The hacker's not having his fun. And Kareem and myself are not having a Microsoft Unboxed podcast discussion about it. That's the part I don't get.
Yeah, they were very eager to announce it. They say they have some things in place. Again, they haven't officially released it yet. I don't know if there's going to be changes made to it because they haven't addressed any of these concerns that other cybersecurity people in the field have echoed. There's no communication between them and those individuals that we know publicly. So we'll just have to go on based on faith saying that, if they release it as they mentioned it, this could be an issue for them, and it could just ruin perhaps the biggest selling point for these Copilot plus PCs. I mean, granted, the Windows Studio features are great. Some of the other things that could be applied to, content creation are awesome, but they've sold this recall thing. It's like the big get in Windows 11 coming up soon. And if this comes out as the privacy nightmare, no one's going to upgrade to these Copilot PCs, and you've just doomed everyone who's invested in this MPU race or whatnot, essentially. So I hope they get it addressed. But again, Microsoft isn't the only company betting on this. Now, they may not be relying on MPUs to do it necessarily, but Google is apparently working on a recall feature for Chrome OS. I believe, again, this was at Computex, Google's John Solomon, I guess, was there, and he was talking about how they could mimic something similar. And I think he said that I'm not going to talk about recall, but I think the reason some people feel it's creepy is when it doesn't feel useful. It doesn't feel like something they initiate it or they get a clear benefit from. If the user says, like, let's say we're having a meeting and discussing complex topics, there's a benefit to running a recorded function if at the end of it, it can be useful for creating notes, action items. But if a user needs to put that on and decide, but the user needs to put that on and decide when to use it. So he's saying that instead of the opt-in approach at the beginning of a update to Windows, that people can turn it on and off at their choosing. He thinks that might be more applicable. And I believe Copilot does allow you to pause and unpause if you've opted into this thing. So you can get something similar. Quote, to be truly useful, an agent needs to understand and respond to the complex and dynamic world just like people do, and take it in and remember what it sees and hears to understand context and take action. And this is part of what Google had kind of mentioned, and this is their version of it called Project Astra, which is that video slash chatterbot thing that they had, where you can like show your phone camera at an item, and it starts to give you context and information and history and recall on whatever you're pointing at. So instead of Microsoft's snapshot version, I believe Google's going to be doing a screen record essentially to a certain degree. Another quote, and I'll let you jump in after this one, is, quote, I think there's a piece of it which is very relevant, referencing recall, which is the notion of having some kind of context and memory of what's happening on a device, Solomon said. So think of it as something that's like maybe viewing your screen, and then you walk away, you get distracted, you chat to someone at the water cooler, and you come back. You could have a kind of rewind function. You could have some kind of recorder function that would kind of bring you back to that. So I think I think that is where the crossover is there. I think it's something there in terms of screen capture in a way that obviously doesn't feel creepy, and it feels like the user's in control. Again, sounds very similar to Copilot, except Copilot's doing a every 3 second screenshot, while Astra is basically just recording the screen and somehow being able to pull from the recording the information. What are your thoughts on them kind of doing this after Microsoft's already taken arrows forward?
Well, that they feel similar, and I understand why Google is doing this, and I think it's a half and half approach. Is it a good thing to have? Sure. But it's also a good shot at Microsoft. Hey, while you're over here struggling trying to figure yours out, and you're getting some negative press, here's ours, and here's how ours will work. Because I think, when you said for Chrome OS, I kind of done my head like that. I was like, well, Chrome OS is a distant third in the operating system. Well, why do we not see something like this for Google and Google services? Hey, we're using it for our services on your Windows device that you went and purchased, and it is built into our ecosystem. And the other thing that came to mind, where are all these snapshots going? Microsoft says, they're going to take, 40 gigs of your space?
I think it's 25 actually.
Okay, 25 gigs. Okay, are they using that 25 gigs to store your snapshots, and that's all that you get? Where's Google putting these snapshots? Chromebooks, folks, don't have the biggest hard drives in the world. At least Microsoft, with these Copilot PCs, has set a minimum of 512 up to, and we've seen up to 1 terabyte so far. I'm sure if needed, an OEM will make a 2 terabyte or a 1.5, whatever. Where are these being put? Are the storage options that Google's using? I'm sure they're using your Google account. They want you to buy that storage space. So are we dependent upon the Google Cloud to house these things? There's still a lot about these recall features that we just don't know. And I'm not even sure they're going to be answered on day one when somebody purchases their device. I think people are going to have to start using these devices, and then somebody is going to have that moment of, oh, I need a recall. And they're actually going to go there and click on it and start to use it. And somebody's going to go, oh, I don't like this or I don't like that. And we're going to see it. Now, the reviewers, such as Kareem and myself, we're going to hit these items day one because we have heard about them, we've reported them, we know about them. But the consumer is going to be the one that, if they don't like it or they're scared of it, as you said, this kills the whole initiative, whether Google does it or Microsoft does it. They've got to get this part right. You've got to get people's privacy, and not only get their privacy right, but make them feel secure about what they're doing. We have these discussions every week. Somebody and security. We've got to start getting this stuff right.
Yeah, I'm going to end with, like I said at the top, this reminds me of the Xbox One and PlayStation 4 announcements where both had planned to talk about live entertainment, always on connected devices. This is, well documented that Microsoft went out, did that, and lost the console generation that night. Sony, realizing the flack that they were getting, immediately backtracked and pulled that stuff out of their announcements, and then doubled back on just saying, hey, we made a console. They yanked all that stuff out of their own console as well. Again, they had planned to do it. So I see that here we have Google talking about the experience of recall, but never really addressing, to your point, the privacy aspects. Azure currently, if you're going to be using it on a phone, again, it's an internal demo, so we'll see how far it goes. But it uses the cloud. It doesn't use your on-device storage in order to run its AI experience. It takes live video and then it pulls from the cloud all the AI intelligence. So presumably, if they move forward with this, that's what will happen on a Chromebook. To your point, there's not a lot of extra storage space, so they will probably just use the cloud. And what they're going to do, I believe, is watch Microsoft take all kinds of flack for this, and twist itself into knots to be on-device privacy and all that. And then when people realize, like, hey, you know what? I don't care if it's on device. I just need to access my recall on any device I have anywhere because there's more utility in that. That's when Google will step up and say, hey, we use the cloud. You can get your recall experience on any Chromebook device. All you have to do is just log in. And that's where, they see the benefit of it. They don't have to be the secure one. So we'll let the conversation roll on. I'm sure there'll be more to talk about next week about it as well as we get more information. People start getting their hands on the devices and we start seeing reviews come up, I believe, next week. So stay tuned. Recall will be here for a while and we'll see if it lasts longer than Timeline did, and if it's more secure than we had all expected. With that being said, where can people find you?
David PAJ 1978. You can recall it, catch it. You can recall that from previous podcast. Now, don't go back too far in your recall because I recently joined Threads as my partner here harassed me for many episodes to make sure I was on Threads. So David PAJ 1978 over on Threads or Twitter/X. Probably more of Threads because if you were watching the Twitter announcement this week, they are now promoting adult content on Twitter, so my days of Twitter may be coming to an end.
Yes, I am Kareem Anderson on Threads. It's just a nicer place over there. I enjoy it. I do occasionally linger on Twitter at Mindhead1 if you want to talk about gaming, talk about comics, talk about movies. Find me in those spots. I'm also on Instagram as well. We want to thank you guys for joining us for another week, taking some time to hang out with the two of us and our little podcast. We hope that you enjoyed it, you were informed, and that you can go and press all your friends at the next dinner party about the new tech that you know about. With that being said, have a great weekend.
Have a good weekend, folks. Thanks for joining us.